Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Wow, some good energy right out of the gate at 8:30 in the morning. It's terrific. My name is Joe Hoffman, and I am with Crestron Electronics. Today's topic. This is a pretty cool one for me to do because I've done this presentation many times, and ultimately this presentation kind of leads into something that's current. Something gives you a little bit of history from how we got here, talk a little futuristic to where we're going, and talk a little reality to what's been forced upon us in terms of distributing digital video, right? Everybody here familiar with or know of or at least heard of 4K? Can you raise your hand? All right. All right. How many people are current users or familiar with Crestron digital media? I see those. Great. Okay. So the official topic of this presentation is basically 4K distribution challenges, right? Inside that mix of the presentation, we're going to be talking a little bit about streaming and how streaming input and output affects your digital platform. And then finally, some of the challenges that 4K brings to the table and when you're designing a new system or perhaps inserting 4K into your existing distribution system. So, all right, so a little bit of a review before we get into the kind of the meat and potatoes of the presentation. A little bit of review on Crestron digital media, okay? And I apologize if I keep looking up here. What's on my screen is a little smaller, so I think it's be a little easier to see it up there. Basically, digital media in its raw form is a complete transportation, switching, and distribution system for video, okay? It's been shipping since 2009, and originally when it was released back in 2009, it was kind of a bleeding edge product that allowed you to take traditional analog video in the form of VGA, composite, component, whatever kind of flavor of the day of analog you had, to the new emerging digital signal pathway, traditionally using HDMI, DVI, and DisplayPort. All right. We wanted to develop a system that would give you switching capabilities that would handle, in a hybrid solution, any kind of video you threw into it, but then on the output, it had to be the pathway to get to that digital display. So we spent the first 2 or 3 years of introduction of digital media running around talking to people about, VGA's going away. And a lot of people thought that wasn't possible, but we obviously saw that it was, okay? So one of the biggest hurdles in doing so was something that a lot of people had a mixture of information that was being floated out there back in the day of what did that mean that analog was going away, all right? You would see consumer models having something totally different in its connectivity than professional grade models. And then we started seeing that whole idea of a consumer model and professional model kind of displays kind of coming into the middle and creating this idea of a prosumer model, all right? Then you had Best Buy out there educating a lot of the consumer folks. There was a lot of misinformation. And fast forward to today, we're pretty much all on that HDMI connector for the most part. Same thing is happening today with 4K. There's a lot of stuff that you read out there. You walk into Best Buy or Costco or Walmart and you see these things called Ultra HD or 4K. You watch the World Cup over the summer and the little banners growing across the field, Sony 4K. It's all over the place. It's a marketing machine. So how do we take those ideas of what's the facts versus marketing versus what you might see on the consumer line? How do we make that real and possible in the professional, in the commercial application? What do you do when you're designing a system? What do you do when you're designing a system that you already have and you want to insert 4K video? All right, so this is exactly what we're going to be faced with today and talking about. So digital media in 3 minutes, all right? We're going to take a little less than 3 minutes. It's a little rudimentary, but I think it's going to kind of make sense. You're going to start off, obviously, with a source, a component, That source could feed into some type of transmitter, or it could feed directly into some type of switcher, in this case digital media. All right? For those of you that are new to digital media, I apologize, I'm going to be rocking in front of the screen a couple times here. But the idea of digital media is to populate the chassis with the appropriate input cards that your sources are dictating. So if I've got composite, or I've got HDMI, or I've got VGA, or perhaps I've got a digital media input that I want to put a wall plate in and run Cat5 out to an input plate, I simply populate those input planes within the chassis. On the output side of things, I've got a choice to do either copper or fiber. And in that case, I make the decision whether the building is appropriate for copper, and if so, I'll populate those cards with copper. I can do single or multi-mode fiber, and we've got cards for that as well. So one of the beautiful parts about digital media and its plane, and its backplane, is that they're field removable cards. So you might see this switcher now be populated with composite inputs. Okay? 2 years down the road, you've got a new format like 4K, and you simply just have your integrator pull out that input card and then populate it with the appropriate card. This is your switcher, all right? But it's more than just a switcher. Kind of think about it as a platform. Now, I know that might twist some things and make you turn your head just a tad bit, but it's the all-in-one platform. It is built right out of the gate from 2009 to be able to support what we're doing in 2014 with just some minor modifications. It also has the ability to put streaming input cards in there, streaming output cards. You can also go from HD, not only can you output your video via copper or fiber, but you can also do it with directly HDMI out to a source as well. All right? So getting back to my original, maybe I did take the 3 minutes. Getting back to the original idea, I'm coming out of the backplane into my receiver unit that sits at the display, and the receiver traditionally turns it into HDMI at the projector or the LCD monitor. All right? Pretty basic, right? From digital media standpoint, we've got everything from a 2x1 switch all the way up to a 128 by 128. And furthermore, there's all-in-one boxes that are not changeable. They're built-in ports. And a lot of you are familiar with the digital media DMPS 100, 200, and 300, where your DM inputs and all your video inputs are built directly into the backplane. So it's not interchangeable on that model. Okay? But the majority of our sweet spot with this product line is the card-based switcher, and that's what we're going to focus on this morning. There's over 100,000, actually, this is a little dated, it's probably up to about 120,000 now, installations of digital media around the world, and we're at over $1 billion, it's actually about $1.4 billion in sales of DM since 2009. Okay? So it is indeed a very important piece of what we do at Crestron, but more importantly, what you do in your field and the challenges that you face with infrastructure. Okay? Digital media will allow you to overcome a lot of those challenges that we'll talk about. Okay, so what is 4K? All right. I talked earlier about the World Cup, and I have a couple young children, and one of the things that they were interested in over the summer was, watching these World Cup games and the craziness of it all, and Americans were doing well. But my one son is kind of a video freak like myself, and he just kept saying, "Dad, what's 4K? What's 4K?" And I was faced for the first time kind of trying to answer that question without standing in front of people and giving a little bit more of a scientific definition for it. So, but essentially what I did was I explained it to him that, hey, see that TV we're watching right now that's called 1080p? Well, it's basically double that in its pixel resolutions, okay? That's really all it is. 1080p is, in some cases, referred to now as 4K, but it's 4 times the resolution of 1080p. So what does that mean? It's a new class of of monitors that you're seeing out there in the professional grade. You probably saw them all on the floor today. But even more importantly, when you walk into Best Buy, what do you see on the box? Does it say Quad HD? Does it say 4K? Because Quad HD is really, excuse me, Ultra HD, and that's a fun marketing term, right? But Ultra HD is 3840 by 2160, which is not true 4K. The 4K down here, you see it's 4096 by 2160. Okay? So you've got a mix match of what's going on in the marketplace from the display manufacturers. When you're building your platform, you have to accommodate for this. What are you buying? What's it said that its native resolution is? Because approximately 17:9 on true 4K, but you go up here into the quad and the Ultra HD, that it's really 16:9. So the digital platform in your switching piece really plays an important role in reconciling these differences to what you may have in your installation. Okay? Why the demand for 4K? It's pretty easy. Marketing machine. Seems so simple, but that's basically the truth. Big guys need to sell more TVs, right? It's kind of how we got from the analog to the digital world, although Hollywood played a little bit of a role in that and content protection. But the end result is large screens are getting larger, they're getting more crisp, clean. People's expectation is that things develop and that we improve the technology that we were asked to support. All right? It's no doubt that 4K is here to stay. Not going away. It's not some type of thing that, what about 3D? That went away, 3D was supposed to take over the world. Kind of. But again, 4K is actually has its true value. Okay? Now, one of the objections when I do in this presentation is they talk about, well, wait a minute. So we got all those 4K displays. Pretty pictures, right? But what about content? Because they always say in the digital signage industry that content is king, right? When you have content, the message that you're trying to portray out there is, for digital signage, is more important because you've got stuff that people can relate to. When you walk into a retail store and you're checking out at the what do they call that, point of sale, and you've got some type of messaging that says 20% off of this, you may get out of line and go back. It has an impact. But the content in our world right now is really only readily available in a couple different marketplaces. So content is slow to develop, and the display manufacturers are way ahead of the game. Crestron's way ahead of the game, and we're kind of waiting for the content to be pushing along very soon. So once the content hits, which most people say that it could be anywhere from 8 to 12 months when you start seeing regular 4K based content rather than it just being kind of in a medical imaging field and some of your more here's the, sorry, I'm jumping along here, but basically here's the applications of the residential side of the space and the commercial side. Really, we're seeing security and medical imaging being the two, and including high-end digital signage being the source of what much content is out there. Okay? But make no mistake, just because the content is not there doesn't mean that the need for building infrastructure is not there. Because if you build an infrastructure that can only support 1080p and not 4K, what happens when that presenter comes in and tries to display the 4K content? What are you going to do? You just spent several $1,000s on a very expensive AV distribution piece that cannot support what somebody's trying to present. There is, however, a few sources out there like MacBooks and a Dell brand that are outputting at a 4K resolution. All right, anybody seen these out there? Anybody have one? MacBooks with Retina? Okay. So what does all this mean in terms of the infrastructure? Well, very simple. At least double the amount of data rate. It's going to have consequences in how that is pushed over either Cat5, or excuse me, over copper or fiber, and how its infrastructure is set up. So if you look at something like the 1080p versus the 4K, if I'm at 60 frames per second, I only need about 4.46 gigabytes. However, if I go up to 4K at 24 or even 50 frames per second, it's double, almost 9. Extenders are often needed just to complement the challenges of HDMI and how far HDMI can go. At 4K, 30 feet is risky, if even at all possible. Okay, so I'm going to skip around here in just a second to get to somewhat of the meat, just simply based on time. So in Crestron's lab, as you can see, that's one of our development and our engineering labs where they test all the digital media equipment that comes in and goes out. They've got a new source, a new display. We like to put it to its test, and not only just a backplane switcher, but also from an HD-based T standpoint to kind of understand where the various manufacturers are going. Because inevitably, folks like VIcom and folks like Crestron are asked to support things that are coming out of nowhere. We don't know where that source was built. We don't know what type of firmware is on that particular display. So whatever you have in the middle of the game has to compensate for each one of those. Crestron developed about 6 months ago a certification program for any source or any display with anything to do with 4K, whether it be content being outputted on an HDMI connector from a laptop, or whether it be a display manufactured either in a projector format or simply a flat screen format. You might start seeing, you may have already seen them now, but very soon you're going to see some of the boxes from Sony and digital projections and Samsung have actually Crestron certified 4K directly on the box itself, and in some cases it may be even on the bezel. That way your integrator knows, you know that what you're putting in there is certified by Crestron to work in that environment. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play a short video for you real quick. And it's going to show somewhat of the importance of why we're doing this. All right. So it's about a 2-minute video, if you can bear with me here in just a moment. Let me launch this. Oop. I gotta stop presenting here. Hold on just a moment. There we go. Okay.
I'm here in the Crestron DM lab to demonstrate some of the reasons we created the Crestron 4K certified program. In the demonstration I'm showing here, I've got a standard Red Ray player built by Red, the guys who designed the high-end 4K camera, and this Sony X850 display. These are two high-quality 4K devices. I've plugged them into one another with a single HDMI cable, and as you can see, these devices have serious interoperability issues. You see screen flashing, HDCP problems, and other dropouts. This is not acceptable in any installation. Now I'm going to show you some of the reasons why that is and how digital media can help you avoid those problems. So we've seen this Red Ray player doesn't work with the TV, and now we've taken it over to our oscilloscope lab so we can find out why. We plug this Red Ray player into this Agilent Technologies digital oscilloscope, and we're looking at an eye diagram that represents the HDMI specification. What we can see here is serious incursion of the signal onto the eye itself. When we look at the right-hand side of this eye, all of the red areas are places where bits have incurred into the eye. These are bits that could be now received in error. Ones get turned into zeros, zeros get turned into ones. Too many of these, and not only do you have sparkles, you can start to have image dropouts or even no image at all. This scope now has clearly shown us that this source is not quite getting us the signal that we're going to need for that television to work properly. We've now connected the red ray player through a digital media input card and connected that up to the oscilloscope. What we see now is a very clean looking eye with clear edges and no incursion of the signal on the eye itself. This should be a really good working system. Now we brought the red ray back over to the Sony X850, but this time we've connected it through a digital media system. We've taken the red ray, gone into an HDMI input on the DM switch, through the switch, out an HD-based T 4K output, into a room box, and then via HDMI into the display. So you can see now, we're on the video screen, the image is stable, there's no flickering, no flashing. I can fire up one of these video images and see good-looking 4K content, thanks to the power of digital media.
Okay, makes sense? So that's kind of the reason why that's actually what's happening in the certification lab at Crestron. Okay. Now, how does that impact you? If I can get up there. There we go. At the end of that test, everybody's familiar with Carfax reports? For when you buy a used car, you get a little report saying the history and all the tests. And we're going to do the same thing for you for that particular source or display. The integrator and yourself are going to get a copy of exactly what the native resolution is, how it's been tested, and what the expectation is over Crestron Digital Media if you choose that particular display. Very, very important. Okay? It's published, actually, they're all on our website, so you can see I think they're up to like 35 or 40 now. You can see all the make and models. There's actually, and I've got some to pass out too, some of the challenges of distributing 4K video and a little bit more of a less condensed version of this presentation, but you're welcome to take one. That is somewhat of our guidelines, if you will, on how to build a 4K distribution piece. I think that's a very valuable read for those of you that are interested. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is go right to the changes that are being implemented. In this case here, today, I've got end-to-end capability of distributing 4K. I can come out of my source, I've got a 4K input card or 4K transmitter in place and in production and shipping today that would displace a traditional digital input, right? On the output side of things, I've got a 4K output card. So if you indeed do have 4K input, or excuse me, 4K content, I've got the plane in the transmitter today that'll support it, but more importantly, most of you may run into this before you run into that side. So I've got the 4K output card, I've got a 4K receiver that just simply replaces the traditional Crestron digital media receiver you may already have there. So the changes that needs to happen, sorry, I'm gonna bounce back to an earlier slide here. If I've got a card-based switcher, I simply pull out one of these cards, put in a 4K card. I pull out one of these if I have an existing digital media system. I pull out one of these output cards, put in the 4K output, and I simply change out the receiver at the display, and I'm distributing content. Okay? But even more importantly, from the standpoint of matrixing all those signals pathway, this is the savior, if you will. What happens if you try to throw out, let's say you've got an existing installation and you've got a bank of 20 monitors. 18 of them are 1080p monitors. 2 of them are 4K. Right? But I want to take 4K content and put it on those 1080p monitors. For one of the first times in our industry, upscaling is not as important as downscaling. And that's really key. I've got to have a box that's sitting at the display that gives me the ability to down-res and be able to take 4K content and push it on that 1080p monitor. To be able to matrix, and what your expectation is to send any signal anywhere through the Crestron DM switcher. that receiver there will allow you to do so. As you can see, it down converts any 4K format to 2K or 1080p. Standard digital media control ports that it gives you through consumer electronics, CEC control. And then finally the connectors, and I know the integrators love this part, the connectors are on the side rather on the back plane. And so a few changes have been made to that box itself. All right. And then finally, just to, in the interest of time, I want to jump into another change in the back plane. Obviously, if I think of digital media as the platform, I want to put anything in it and push anything out of it. Okay? Well, the anything in it part is now being asked to support streaming in and streaming out. If you think about it, there's a LAN port on the back side of the DM switcher. So if I'm putting streaming into that, and it's an H.264 stream, I have the ability right here to put my content coming from the LAN directly into the switcher itself. Again, pulling out if you have an existing DM switcher, pulling out a card and inserting this card. Okay? Even more importantly, I can get preview out on that HDMI port. All right. On the outside sort of things, this is your encoder and decoder for streaming into digital media. All right. Any questions so far on what we've talked about?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
my name is Josh Kuntosumo from NATO.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, with the 4K, we are increasing the bandwidth use dramatically. And that will have a negative impact on the, especially on secure networks.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a tool to compress that signal or make it less bandwidth, eating kind of stuff?
When you're running, the question is, should we compress are you talking about compressing 4K video?
Any tool
Anything?
that will diminish the bandwidth usage.
So what our recommendation is on when you're distributing content, we've really got two different sets of the scope we're looking at. We're distributing content hardware-wise through either copper or fiber, or we're distributing content on the streaming side of things, right? From the digital media output, if I can go, in fact, there's a slide in here, and I'll refer to it here in just a moment. If I can go from the standpoint of sending a signal through 4K at 330 feet using Crestron digital media 4K certified cable, there's really no need to compress.
Right.
Okay? If you are doing streaming,
That's the key.
that's a whole, long conversation.
Watching that, whatever we are streaming.
That's a very important question. And if it's okay with you, I would like to talk to you about it afterwards, because I think we have a long list of questions. And in my booth over there, we've got some information I'd like to show you. Would that be okay? Great, thank you. Any other questions so far? All right. Okay, and I'm going to move on down the line here. Digital media, and this is going to be a hard slide to read here, but basically digital media as a hub, okay? I've got 10 points of why digital media is a absolute necessary need or must-have of any AV distribution. If I'm streaming H.264 sources in, okay? I've got the ability to do so into the backplane of digital media. I can input, whoops, I skipped one, cross-platform input for BYOD. All right. Anybody remember being at my booth and seeing the Air Media Box that gives you the ability to send what's from an iPad or an Android device or a Windows tablet or a laptop without any connection points without any cables going into the display? The output of that Air Media Box would feed into a DM switcher. So therefore, I could take any iPad, and ideally and realistically, I could switch that to any of my displays across the building. So BYOD coming into digital media. I've got 4K input, which we've been talking about, and then zero latency connection points, meaning digital media inputs for bring your own device. Video wall capability coming into digital media. I could have a quad screen split using some DM cards. Preview on a touch panel using the HDMI out, or streaming if you want, using an H.264 signal. Number 7, wireless streaming output for BYOD, meaning I could take the wireless stream of what's, if I'm sending what's on my iPad out through the digital media switch, I could use that same and stream it out, not only just having a hardware connection, I can stream it. Direct point-to-point for 4K over twisted pair. Downscaling, as we talked about, it's very, very important for taking a 4K content and pushing out to existing owner-furnished equipment. And then finally, streaming to any other locations worldwide who has a digital media switch. This is exactly what's different from what the traditional matrix switchers that we've seen in the past. Usually it was meant for a building. An analog switch way back in the day was this building and this building only. Digital media switchers is across the enterprise. And I think that's the change of thought from Crestron's standpoint of what you're putting into it. And that streaming capability really gets us there. And that's all I have, guys. Are there any questions for me? And I would like to talk to you afterwards if you don't mind. That would be great. I've got some information. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a trade-in program, like if you have an existing Crestron?
We do. There's an existing trade-in program for input cards, output cards, and the receiver boxes. And I would encourage you to talk to your VIcom sales rep, and then we can take it beyond there. But there is.